I sat in the cold, dimly lit funeral parlor, holding the divorce papers that John had just thrown at me. I looked up at John, noticing the resemblance between him and his mother's portrait. But while his mother looked kind, John only seemed impatient. "I'll split the assets with you 50-50. Just sign the papers," John said, checking his watch as if he was in a hurry. Clutching the papers, I whispered, "Tomorrow is your mother's funeral. Aren't you staying tonight?" His mother had been diagnosed with late-stage liver disease 6 months ago. She deteriorated quickly, and 2 days ago she suddenly asked me to call John. They had a falling out years ago, and his mother had never tried to contact him since. Knowing she couldn't hold on much longer, I immediately tried to reach John, but his phone was off. His secretary also had no idea where he was. His mother shouted, "It's all karma," and then she was gone. We had made all the necessary arrangements, and the funeral proceeded smoothly. The only thing people criticized was that her own son wasn't there to mourn her. Instead, it was her daughter-in-law who managed everything. John glanced at the photo, his expression complicated. Then he sneered, "Everyone knows you were like her real daughter. Does it matter if I'm here?" I felt a surge of anger. "John, do you have any conscience? Your mother gave up her life for you, raised you without asking for anything in return, and you can't even show her basic respect." John looked at me coldly. "You're just saying this because you don't want a divorce." I stared at the man in front of me, feeling like I didn't know him anymore. Suddenly, a thought struck me. Is it because Sarah came back? John froze for a moment, then turned away. "It has nothing to do with her. Of course, Sarah was always the love of his life." "Just leave," I said, not wanting to say another word to him. John stared at me. "We've been pretending for so many years. It's enough. I'll give you what you deserve. What more do you want?" I smiled bitterly. So this was how he saw me all along. I was an orphan, and his mother had helped many people, including me. I always called her Mrs. Smith affectionately. I got into a good university and went to their home to thank her when I received my acceptance letter. That was the day I saw John's photo. Later, I discovered he attended the same school, and slowly I fell for him. Strictly speaking, it was a one-sided love. He had a girlfriend back then, so I never intended to let him know. But unexpectedly, his girlfriend suddenly went abroad. Seeing John so downcast, I began to approach him. He treated me like one of his many admirers, neither warm nor cold. I didn't give up. When John went drinking, I waited outside for him. When he got into fights, I shielded him. When he got sick from being in the rain, I took him to the hospital. Everyone at school said I was John's doormat, but I didn't care. As long as he was okay, Mrs. Smith wouldn't worry. Later, when John started his business, I left my well-paying job to help him. For the first 2 years, I had almost no salary and even took out loans to help him with projects. Our efforts paid off, and John succeeded. Once the company stabilized, John proposed to me. I couldn't believe it because for those years, John had kept his distance from me. Mrs. Smith was overjoyed and even gave me a family heirloom, so I married John. John was furious, accusing me of being selfish. I felt exhausted and interrupted him. "I agreed to the divorce." I gave John a condition. "We can divorce, but after a month." John eyed me warily. "You're not planning anything, are you?" Holding my chest that felt tight, I replied coldly, "Don't worry. I won't waste your time." Didn't he know about the cooling-off period for divorce when he had the lawyer draft the papers? The sudden ringing of John's phone broke the silence. We were close enough that I could hear the sweet voice on the other end. "John, how much longer will you be? I'm scared being alone." Only 2 people called John that way. One was gone, and the other was his ex-girlfriend, Sarah. I used to call him that too, but John snapped at me once and I never called him that again. "See you at the Civil Affairs office in a month," John said after comforting Sarah, and left. If Sarah hadn't come back, would you still want a divorce? I asked, feeling exhausted after the funeral. Returning home, I noticed something was off as soon as I turned on the lights. Many of John's things were gone, like his shoes and the clothes I bought him. My friend Mia often said I was foolish for spending my money on John instead of saving it for myself. Back then, I would say, "Seeing John in the clothes I bought makes me happy." "One day you'll regret it," she would say. Her words came true. John and I had good times too. After our marriage, when his company stabilized, John asked me to quit my job to avoid conflicts with his business partners, who were his friends. I agreed. Since his mother wasn't well, I took care of her and John after quitting my job. John had a weak stomach, so I took classes to learn about medicinal diets and soups. The happiest moments were when John came home from work and drank the soup I had simmered all afternoon. But I couldn't remember the last time John came home for dinner. I would drink the entire pot of soup alone in the empty house. 3. Standing outside the apartment, I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. I was stunned when the door opened. It was Sarah. John had let her stay here. This apartment was my choice, close to John's company so he could rest here when he worked late. I had carefully selected the furniture to ensure John's comfort, but now he was using it to hide his lover. Sarah greeted me nonchalantly. John is in the shower. I couldn't ignore the provocation in her eyes or the red marks she intentionally exposed on her neck. Living in my house, sleeping with my husband. I should have turned and left, but I didn't. Maybe a part of me still held on to some hope. I walked past Sarah into the apartment. I brought John some food. The place was a mess. Clothes were piled on the sofa. The coffee table was covered with various takeout boxes. You're so domesticated. I can't cook at all. Sarah followed me in. But John likes everything I buy. The bathroom door opened and John walked out wrapped in a towel. Seeing me, he was momentarily stunned. What are you doing here? Sarah quickly wrapped her arms around John, smiling. She brought you food. Don't trouble yourself. I can cook, John said, wrapping a towel around his head. I'll help you, Sarah said, taking the towel from him. Watching them flaunt their affection as if I were the intruder, I felt a bitter amusement. I had spent years helping him recover, so he could now ruin it all. John turned to go upstairs and Sarah, with feigned embarrassment, said, John has a bad temper. Don't mind him. How ridiculous, needing another woman to console me about my own husband. Thank you for looking after my husband, I said calmly, placing the food on the only clear spot on the counter. Make sure John drinks the soup. I walked out of the apartment, even closing the door behind me. As I repeatedly pressed the elevator button, anxiously waiting for it to arrive, I heard Sarah and John's conversation just as the elevator doors were closing. John, what's in this? It smells medicinal. Should I throw it away? Go ahead. The sound of something being tossed echoed in my mind and my world went dark. I started packing my things at home. The house was a wedding gift from John's mother. Since we were getting divorced, it should go back to John. Then I received a call from Mia. She told me John had brought Sarah to the company and asked her to process Sarah's onboarding, which led to a big argument. Mia and I joined John's company around the same time, and we quickly became friends because of her straightforward personality. Later, I learned Mia had joined the company for her boyfriend, who was John's business partner. Mia always said we were alike, but I knew we weren't the same. Mia and her boyfriend genuinely loved each other. I was her bridesmaid at their wedding, and Mia handed me the bouquet, wishing I would find my happiness. At the time, all I could think about was John, instinctively searching for him. What was John doing then? I could barely remember his past self. When I married John, Mia always thought it was a pity, saying John wasn't good enough for me. Especially when I quit my job, Mia was even more upset with John's actions. She worked as the HR director at the company, and her husband never asked her to leave her job. I met Mia outside. She immediately started cursing John, calling him a jerk, and how she had scolded Sarah at the company, calling her a shameless mistress, which made Sarah cry and embarrass John. John almost hit Mia, but her husband arrived in time, had security remove Sarah from the office, and dragged John back to his office, preventing further humiliation. I nodded, knowing Mia's husband was decisive and more suited to run the company than John. He even asked if you were the one speaking ill of Sarah behind his back. I spat at him, saying he was blind for not seeing what kind of person Sarah was, Mia said with disdain. I wasn't surprised. John always believed we were the reason he and Sarah broke up. What are you going to do? Mia was still furious. Just say the word and I'll help you deal with that shameless woman. I looked at the clear blue sky, feeling unexpectedly lighter. I'm divorcing John. Mia was stunned, then turned angry. Did that jerk force you? It seemed she would kill John if I nodded. I shook my head. Mia, I think I'm starting to let go. Mia had witnessed my entire journey from unrequited love to marrying John. She understood what I meant and sighed after a long pause. It's good to let go. You're amazing and you'll find someone better. He doesn't deserve you. But I still wanted to cry. I had loved John for 8 years. 1/8 of my life was spent on him. I sat at home, lost in thought about what Mia had told me. Sarah returned 3 months ago. I didn't know until my husband accidentally mentioned it. I didn't know how to tell you since your mother-in-law was seriously ill. I haven't spoken to my husband since then. Men are all the same. So Sarah had returned that early. John knew, which is why he didn't have time to come home for dinner. Knocking interrupted my thoughts. I opened the door to find John standing there, furious. Why are you targeting Sarah? We agreed to divorce. What more do you want? His accusations hit me like a slap. Do you think I'm that kind of person? John sneered. Aren't you? I don't want to dwell on the past. Now that Sarah's back, we can put everything back on track. Stop causing trouble. I was confused. What do you mean? John impatiently yelled. If it weren't for you and my mother scheming against me, I wouldn't have married you. Our marriage was just a task to complete. I couldn't believe my ears. We've been married for 6 years. Didn't you have any feelings for me? John was silent for a moment. No. I started laughing. One last question. 3 months ago on my birthday you promised to come home early, but I waited all night and you never showed. Were you with Sarah? John hesitated, then admitted it. I pushed John out of the door. Get out. What's wrong with you? John looked puzzled. I didn't want to see him. I slammed the door and collapsed to the floor. I wish this was all a nightmare. I got the divorce certificate. John followed me out of the civil affairs office, calling after me. Where are you going? I'll give you a ride. I handed him the keys expressionlessly. These are the house keys. I'm returning them. John looked conflicted. You've moved out. That was your mother's house. It should go back to you. You can keep living there. John, Sarah suddenly appeared, wrapping her arm around his. People in the hall noticed the commotion and looked over. What are you doing here? John awkwardly pushed Sarah away. I came to pick you up so we can celebrate. Sarah was staking her claim right in front of me. Excuse me, I said, not interested in watching their display of affection. But Sarah called out to me. Thank you for taking care of John all these years. I'll take good care of him from now on. Sarah. John scolded her softly. Sarah looked aggrieved and John quickly comforted her. I didn't plan to stay any longer. After handling everything, I would leave. I had rented a short-term apartment, not expecting a visitor the next day. It was John's mother's lawyer. He said she had left a will. After her husband died in a car accident, she used the insurance payout and compensation to invest in stocks and funds, which had multiplied over the years, surpassing John's company's assets. The lawyer said she left everything to me. I didn't understand why she would make such a will, but I couldn't accept it. John is her son. The assets should go to him. But the lawyer said her will didn't mention John and included a clause that if I refused the inheritance, it would all be donated, not a cent to John. Following the lawyer's advice, I had professionals manage the stocks she left. I donated the annual proceeds to medical research to help those in need. I believed she would approve from above. 7. I never expected Sarah to show up. She immediately mocked me. You sure have some nerve, not only keeping John's house but also taking his mother's inheritance. No wonder you were so nice to her all these years. It was all for money. But now you're no longer part of the family, so hand it all over before you get sued. I finally saw Sarah's true colors. I don't know where you heard that, but I didn't take the house. And her inheritance was a gift, not something I stole or took by force. Sarah ranted like a shrew. Stop pretending. If you weren't so fake, John wouldn't have signed the house over to you. And that old woman treated you better than her own son. You must have done something. Maybe the will is fake. You were the only one with her when she died. Who knows how it was made? I was too tired to argue. I tried to close the door, but Sarah blocked it, continuing her tirade. That old woman deserved to die. No wonder she died so early. I glared at her coldly. Watch your mouth. Sarah laughed arrogantly. I'll say whatever I want. She deserved it. Slap. I slapped her hard. Sarah screamed and lunged at me. How dare you hit me? I'll fight you. I grabbed her flailing hands and pushed her away. What are you two doing? Seeing John, Sarah rushed to him, covering her face and crying. John, I just wanted to ask her a few questions and she hit me. I couldn't believe her audacity. She was insulting your mother. Before I could finish, John slapped me. You're becoming a real shrew, John said coldly. I tasted blood as I licked my lip. I sat at the bar looking out at the light rain and the hurried passers-by. After John left with a triumphant Sarah that day, I left the city, moving here and opening a small restaurant specializing in soups. Business was slow, so I had plenty of time to observe people and watch the clouds drift by. The doorbell rang as someone entered. Is it pig stomach soup again today? The customer was a regular. For the past 2 weeks, he'd come every day, always ordering the same soup, making him memorable. The young man nodded shyly. Yes. Just a moment, I said, preparing his order and adding a plate of braised dishes. It's on the house. I made extra today, I explained. Thank you. The next day I saw him at the hospital and learned he was a doctor. He was surprised to see me. Are you hurt? I noticed his name tag, Dr. Adams, which suited his gentle demeanor. I raised my left hand, showing the burn on my finger. I accidentally burned myself. Dr. Adams said, That's quite serious. Let me disinfect and bandage it. I had burned myself after Mia called, telling me John nearly caused a meltdown among the company's partners, trying to get Sarah hired and even considered transferring his shares to her. Distracted, I spilled hot soup on my hand. All done, Dr. Adams said, setting my hand down. I noticed his adept bandaging skills. Thank you. Keep it dry for a few days and come back in 3 days for a change, he instructed, then added, Actually, I'll bring the supplies to you. It's too much hassle to come to the hospital. That's too kind, I said, surprised by his thoughtfulness. Dr. Adams smiled. Consider it a thank you for the delicious meals. Curious, I asked, why do you come to my restaurant every day? Though confident in my cooking, I didn't think it was that remarkable. A patient with stomach issues said the soup was very good and helped him eat. I was curious, so I tried it and found it delicious, with a comforting taste. I stared at Dr. Adams, lost in thought. I had learned to make soups to take care of John, but never imagined it would help others. Dr. Adams continued to visit daily, bringing fresh flowers each time. Sometimes roses, sometimes lilies. I placed a vase on the bar for the flowers he brought. On his days off, Dr. Adams would stay at the restaurant, and I would make him coffee as we watched the rain outside. When the weather clears, let's go hiking, Dr. Adams said, looking at me. I nodded, saying, okay. It was time for a new chapter in my life. 9. Ms. Wen, there's a customer outside who's been standing for a long time, the new assistant said. As business improved, I hired a part-time assistant, a family member of a hospital patient. The person outside was both familiar and unfamiliar. It was John. He noticed me looking and walked over, stopping awkwardly. I thought for a moment, then went to open the door and let him in, pouring him a glass of water. I realized he looked quite haggard. Thank you, John said, lowering his head. Why are you here? I asked calmly. Seeing John made me realize I no longer thought of him, even though it had only been 3 months since our divorce. I'm here on a business trip and wanted to see you. I didn't respond. We had nothing to talk about. After finishing his water, John left in a hurry. Dr. Adams arrived as I was still lost in thought. Are you feeling okay? Dr. Adams asked, touching my forehead. I shook my head. Just thinking about something. After John left, I called Mia. It turned out Sarah's secrets had been exposed. She hadn't gone abroad suddenly but had married, only to be abandoned and left alone. She returned to find John, deceiving him into believing his mother and I had forced her out. But John's friend, not believing her, discovered the truth and presented evidence to John, who refused to believe it and transferred assets to Sarah. Unable to convince John, his friend brought Sarah's ex-husband, who provided proof of her infidelity. Only then did John realize Sarah had been lying. Sarah, sensing trouble, sold the apartment John gave her and fled with his money. I didn't know what to say. John had preferred to believe a stranger over his own mother, who had raised him. Was Sarah too cunning or was John too foolish? But none of it mattered to me anymore. Dr. Adams showed up with 2 theater tickets, asking if I'd like to go. Sure. 10. I didn't expect John to come again the next day. Why are you really in Onching? I asked, not wanting to waste time. I'm sorry. I was wrong. Seeing John so dejected, I didn't know what to say. I asked the question that had troubled me for so long. Why did you believe Sarah over your mother? John's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I shook my head. It doesn't matter anymore. His mother was gone and we had no ties left. No, it was Sarah who deceived me. Please forgive me, John pleaded. You should seek forgiveness from your mother, not me. John's eyes widened. You're right. Let's go see my mother together. I was taken aback. We're divorced. I won't go back with you. No, John shouted. It's not true. We aren't divorced. I was wrong. Please come back. I thought he was insane and pushed him out. The assistant curiously asked, Ms. Wen, who was that man? My ex-husband. She looked surprised, then said, Is he an idiot for not treasuring you? I realized John was indeed a fool, never seeing the people around him clearly. Dr. Adams is much better. You should cherish him, she said pointedly. I could only smile. Dr. Adams came to pick me up. You didn't have to. I can go by myself. Dr. Adams smiled shyly, opening the car door for me. I was worried you might get lost. I saw through his little ploy but said nothing. Dr. Adams had thoughtfully bought the best seats, providing an excellent view of the performance. Except he stifled several yawns during the play. We waited until the end before leaving. Curious, I asked, Why did you take me to a play? Dr. Adams smiled sheepishly. Because you like them. I was stunned. I loved theater, appreciating the actor's portrayal of life's complexities on stage. But John had never shown any interest. In 6 years of marriage, he never noticed, while Dr. Adams, whom I'd known for only 3 months, knew my preference. I realized John no longer stirred any emotions in me. Suddenly, a figure rushed from the shadows and Dr. Adams shielded me. 11. It was John. Like a madman, John punched Dr. Adams, knocking him down. Seeing John about to strike again, I stopped him. John, have you lost your mind? Why are you hitting him? John shouted, You're my wife. How can you be with another man? I laughed. John, if you've forgotten, let me remind you. We're divorced. John pleaded, We can remarry. I know you love me. Let's start over. Taking a deep breath, I spoke calmly. John, let me be honest. I never truly loved you. I was repaying your mother's kindness. John shook his head. I don't believe you. You gave up everything for me. How could you not love me? Because Mrs. Smith was my benefactor. Without her, I wouldn't be who I am today. I had recently realized why Mrs. Smith apologized before she died, saying she had ruined my life. She had deliberately let me see John's photo, knowing we would attend the same school, leading me to notice and eventually fall for him. Mrs. Smith had intended to break John and Sarah apart, knowing Sarah was trouble, wanting to protect her son. She sheltered John too well, making him unable to handle betrayal, causing him to resent her. John saw me as an accomplice, leading him to hurt me. John, you need to grow up. After hitting Dr. Adams, John vanished. I apologized to Dr. Adams. Dr. Adams comforted me. When you don't need to apologize. You did nothing wrong. 2 days later, John returned. He formally apologized, saying he would leave Onching and never bother me again. I hope you find happiness, I said sincerely, wanting his mother's spirit to be at peace. John shook his head. No one could be better than you. John suddenly hugged me tightly, then turned and left. That was the last time I saw John. Dr. Adams continued to visit daily, bringing fresh flowers. Sometimes roses, sometimes lilies. I placed a vase on the bar for the flowers. On his days off, Dr. Adams would stay at the restaurant. I made him coffee and we watched the rain. When the weather clears, let's go hiking, Dr. Adams said, looking at me. I nodded, saying, Okay. I needed a new life. 12. John's perspective. After returning from Onching, Sarah came to me. She begged for another chance, saying she truly loved me. I told her I wanted another chance with one, but it wasn't possible. So why should I give her one? Sarah exploded, calling me stupid, saying I had pushed one away and deserved my misery. He was right. I deserved it, unable to see my own heart, mistaking the false for the real. But if Sarah hadn't deceived me, I wouldn't have questioned my mother, leading to my misunderstanding with one. It was all Sarah's fault. If I couldn't be happy, neither could Sarah. She deserved to suffer as I did. I sabotaged Sarah's life, making it impossible for her to find work. Even when she moved cities, I pursued her until she fled the country, living a miserable life abroad, which gave me a sense of grim satisfaction. I visited my mother's grave, the photo on the headstone chosen by Wen, showing her gentle smile. I broke down in tears, wondering why my mother had never told me the truth. She had Wen and I might still be together. I asked my mother why she kept secrets, but I would never receive an answer. Back at the company, I threw myself into work trying to rebuild my life. I avoided relationships despite my friends encouraging me to move on, except for Mia. Mia always mocked me, calling me a hypocrite. She knew the person I wanted would never come back. Perhaps feeling sorry for me, she stopped blocking me from her social media, allowing me glimpses of Wen's life. 2 years later, I saw Wen's wedding photo in Mia's feed. She was marrying Dr. Adams, the doctor I had met briefly. Wen's smile in the photo was radiant, a happiness I had never seen before. She must be truly content. This was for the best. But why did my heart still ache as if it were breaking all over again? If I could turn back time, would Wen and I have had a different ending?